Welcome everyone to our breakout Wellbeing takes on a new normal. 10 people we have today. Oh, we got a Sushi here. So if you're
Hi,
in the room,
Sushi.
please say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from. So perhaps just like rapid sharing quickly. If you're interested in well-being. We got Shuri as well. Hey, Liva. So we got a nice intimate group today. So I think we're checking in. Okay, so thanks everyone. Oh, we got my sister here there as well. Hey, Nidia.
Hi, Nidia.
So welcome again, everyone. Thanks for dropping by for our session. So just to let everybody know, this session will be moderated. We'll have a Q&A towards the end. So in the meantime, during the presentation, we're going to talk for about like half an hour, and I'm sure some thoughts will pop up here and there. So feel free to leave your questions in the chat down below. All right, so thank you again for joining our
I guess while we are waiting for Edric to say, maybe I can ask a question for you guys to have a think and share. What is well-being to you? Please feel free to share anytime in the chat your thoughts about, well-being for you.
We think well-being should be seen differently in today's age, especially with COVID, that well-being is in everybody's forefront, but also how can we flourish beyond well-being in today's age. So first, let me introduce our team. Jen and I are part of the Transtech team, which stands for Transformative Technology and Audacity. We explore how we can use technology to increase well-being, enhance mental resilience, and empower future citizens to unleash their best selves. And for more than half a year, our team has ways to use transformative technology to increase. We've spoken to the mind experts, the technologists, cognitive scientists, people who are designing urban places, and dove into many papers around how tech and cities are actually can be the conduit for human flourishing. And we hope to impart some of this knowledge and inspiration with you today. But first, since we're talking about well-being, so I thought it's nice for us to make sure we have our own well-being taken care of. So to all of us to take 3 deep together with us, we're going to do 3 rounds of 5 seconds of in-breath, seconds, and out-breath for another 5 seconds. All right? Let's all take a deep hold and out. In and in, hold, and out. Okay, I hope everyone is feeling a little bit more centered, a little bit more calm now to jump into our discussion today. So what Jen and I will cover today is 3 main topics. We're going to talk about the metrics that we think a lot of us in, the misconception, and we've all heard about, but what is the possibility beyond that? Transfer and turn good. Why it's important to talk about flourishing of our society beyond just individual happiness, because places that we live in, how we can use Transtech to turn smart cities into white cities. To kick us off, I thought it's nice for us to take a second and really reflect on, as Janice has already kind of got everyone to think about, what does well-being mean to us? Does it mean feeling happy? Does it mean when we're feeling healthy? When we're feeling accomplished? Kind of experience for many individuals. But most of us grew up with this idea that we need to be happy. That is just the key to a good life. That's what our parents told us every day growing up. But we argue that individual happiness, positive emotion that we also seek after is not the only key to a life worth society put in us today. About the ability to immediately satisfy our needs, to always have to feel joyful and blissful, to fill each quiet moment and blank space in our life with pleasures. Good food, sex, drugs, nice clothes. And the dystopian universe of the Brave New World give us a glimpse of what happens when we are optimizing the society to constantly chase for that high. When you have this pill, what they call soma, they can make you feel with just a pop. So chasing this high and sustaining the bliss often paradoxically leads us to feel empty and disengaged. So if chasing after happiness is not the key to a good life, then what is? Like credit cards, of it now. But when we really dive, do people have this like perception of if we get more stuff and something will be happy? The well-being science course that I really recommend a lot of people to take now that it's free on Coursera, did a study on now that we're becoming more advanced, we're consuming and able to afford more stuff, we should all feel a lot more satisfied and happier with our life, right? So they compared the life satisfaction of people today with people from like decades ago, and turns out the average happiness not only not increased, and it's just not only the good job and all this awesome stuff that we think will make us happy. We think that, oh, when we get that perfect body, eventually we'll feel more satisfied with ourselves. We'll feel a little bit more confident. When we get that good grades, when we get that good job, we'll feel a bit more better about our lives and we feel awesome. But turns out studies after studies that the course dove into say that it's not true. It either don't make us as happy as we expected, or it really doesn't make much difference in our long-term view of happiness. Actually, I'd love to hear, since we're a small group here, to hear from...
Sorry, Edric, you popped out. What did you want us to share?
To share if there's a moment when you think, if I manage to do that, I'll feel happy, but turns out to be false. Maybe you can get some thoughts around this really quickly in the chat.
A moment that we felt happy, but we found out to be false. Okay.
Well, to me, I personally always thought that when I managed to run my startup successfully or get a really good job, I eventually will feel more content and happy with myself. But I always felt there's always that feeling. Every time I manage to get something, there's always that feeling nudging me and that itch that tells me I need to get more and like be more. I compare myself with more people. So it's a never-ending cycle. And we got Alexi here. Hey, Alexi, the person to make him happier than the actual outcome. Okay. Won a sweepstake. Okay. Approval of strangers that didn't really matter to you. Yeah. So we all have that kind of experience where we thought something will make us happy, but turns out not really. And at the same time, now the discussion around the topic around well-being is getting more and more important. There's corporates are adopting like well-being programs. We see millennials who go on yoga retreats, who practice more gratitude and really think about what happiness truly means. But we think that the whole discussion, though it's a good progress, is still very confined around a certain impression or perception of well-being. So people only think about well-being, and people associate well-being a lot with mental health. Only when you feel stress or when you have anxiety or when you feel depressed that you should go and practice yoga or meditation or do reflection. So the idea around well-being today is still very much around survival, surviving, and good to have. But we think that there's a better way to look at well-being. And we think everyone should think about the idea of flourishing. So what is human flourishing? It is a state of complete complete well-being, a state in which all aspects of a person are good. We're not talking about just one, but like a full range of spectrum of different domains in our life that we need to strive to look at. And and not to only be defined as an evanescent, joyful emotion, but really think about how can we lead a life with meaning that gives us a lot of fulfillment, purpose, drive, a sustained state of peace and calm. So Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology, introduced this framework to talk about, okay, now that we know flourishing is important, what are the different domains we should look at? There are different things that will define a good life, but what are they actually? If 5 C's are not it, if more stuff is not, then what is? So as you can see, positive emotions, the joy, the happiness, the bliss is only a part of the whole equation. And just like by prioritizing one over the other, won't get us to the state of flourishing. We should also talk about, are we feeling engaged on the day-to-day? Are we connecting with our passion? Are we nurturing good relationships, not only a shallow one, but also deep, a true relationship with the people around us? Do we find meaning around the things we do every day? Can we serve beyond ourselves to our community, to our country? Are we feeling accomplished? And actually, if you think about accomplishment, it's the opposite of feeling positive, because in order to accomplish something, we always have to withhold that temporary positive emotion in order to work on what's necessary to make you feel that when you look back, you feel accomplished. And of course, to make sure that we could achieve all this, we need to take care of our own health, mentally and physically. So the idea is not to just look at one thing over the other. We have heard of people who are so accomplished in their lives, but only to find that they're devoid of meaning. We've also heard of people who are a bliss junkie, always look for positive emotions, but they're lacking meaning, or like they're not nurturing good relationships. And I really hate it when people say that you can't have it all. Growing up in the university, people always told me you need to choose between sleep, play, and work. You can only have 2 out of 3, something around that sort. But I think everyone should think of ways how they can sleep well, play well, and work well all together. And
yeah,
Janet,
I want to actually share a very personal experience when taking the perma profiler.
Yeah,
it was because as I was taking the perma profiler, my results weren't too bad. My loneliness was 0. I'm in a very loving relationship. My well-being was actually not too bad. So I asked my fiance, like, hey, take this profiler, and share with me your results. And I was astonished to learn that his loneliness was at 6. And I'm like, but we're in such a great relationship. Why is your loneliness at 6? And then it kicked off a conversation that maybe we would never have, because maybe perhaps he felt like he was alone because he's an expat, or maybe because I wasn't paying attention to, his needs. So I strongly kind of urge, you to take up this profile if you have not already, and unlearn my relationship. Yes, you're right, Colin. and share it with your friends and family, and have the conversation about well-being as a start.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that personal story with us, Janice. So I think Janice touched on a really good point about how this should be a movement. Like, we should not only think about surviving, but really how can we thrive in all these different domains. And if I ask, like, are you happy? Most people would think about like a temporary emotional state. Like, I could think that, oh yeah, today I got like 13 likes on my Instagram. That feels pretty good. I'm happy, right? But if we ask ourselves a different question, if we ask ourselves, are we flourishing? Am I flourishing? Immediately the word flourishing alone carries a different weight. You might think twice about whether you're flourishing versus are you happy? And it encompasses a lot of different things, from thinking about, are you thriving physically and mentally? Are you living a life full of purpose and living your fullest potential? Are you developing your intellect? Are you nurturing not only just any kind of relationship, but a strong and deep one that's rooted with a true sense of connection? And most importantly, I feel, again, we shouldn't focus too much. And flourishing doesn't mean that you're constantly being in this blissful state, but also you develop this resilience, because we know our life is full of uncertainty. Things will constantly change. COVID has showed us that. Are we able to persist in the face of setbacks and bounce quickly? So even though these are all the more difficult questions to ask than the simple, are you happy kind of questions, we think this should be the new standard that people constantly have on top of mind from today onwards. And that's what we are proposing, that flourishing should be the new operating system from this for this society on forward. Instead of thinking of well-being as something that you use or think about as a survival, how can we think about how can we thrive instead of surviving? Flourishing as something that is, instead of thinking of well-being and flourishing as something that's nice to have, how can we transition into something that is essential and foundational for us? Meditation as a temporary relief to when we are stressed, to a perpetual continuous state that we're constantly in, like a place of flourishing and well-being and peace. But despite saying all that, why we think actually this is more urgent than ever to talk about this is where we are today can't be more different than where we think we should be headed. If we look at all the studies and reports, we found that people around the world are just feeling worse than ever. Depression is on the rise. People are feeling more anxious than ever. Depression is expected to be the world leading cause for a lot of disability by 2030. So what is going on here? We touched on this a little bit, but I want to dive deeper about how that it turns out the technology, efficiency, urban living, all these things that we think have brought such an immense benefits to us, they turn out to also have texture thinking, wellness, and relationships. There's a couple of things going on here. Social comparison. We talked about how awesome stuff doesn't make us feel happy, but our mind is just a very tricky kind of being. We just tend to think about things in comparison, relative, instead of thinking in an absolute manner. So now that we're more connected than ever, we know what our friends are doing across the world. We know whether a famous person is actually feeding their cat. Yet we feel more isolated than ever, and we have more things to compare about. We are always bombarded with people who are better than us, people who are thinner, more good looking than us, and this makes us feel that we're not enough. And this feeling of not enoughness that causes so much misery in our day-to-day life and feeling disconnection. And technology also led to another problem of instant gratification. We're living in a world where it's so easy to access all these things that make us feel happy and joyful. Why go out in nature while you could stay in bed and have all this limitless access to binge-worthy content? Why take the time to fix your relationship while you can go on Tinder and find more relationships, right? So this has led to a declining resilience in the society. And that's why coronavirus has shaken a lot of people, because we were never put in a place where we really had to sit with ourselves and think about what our problems are and sit with our pain, sit with our negative emotions. And that has caused all of us to be really difficult to bounce back from adversity. And not to mention, the world is increasing in terms of complexity. We have exponentially increasing our ability to impact the world without increasing our ability to make sense of it. So if you were in the Gen Z panel, we talked about the lost sense of control. Everything that we have worked hard for suddenly came crumbling down, and we don't know what to do with it. We just felt the world has just evolved exponentially beyond grasp. So how do we bounce back from this? What is the pathway to flourish amid the whole advancement that doesn't seem to stop? And we think the key to flourishing is to get out of the matrix. So stop taking that soma, the blue pill that is the blissful ignorance, the things we do to distract ourselves from facing our situation. I'm talking about, taking drugs or alcohol to numb our pain instead of sitting with the pain to understand what does the pain teach us, staying in toxic relationships and surface level friendship because it's comfortable, instead of being vulnerable to let people see the ugly side of us and connect really in depth to see what we have through struggle and experiences. And so all that requires us to take the red pills, which is to face the grueling truth about our own situation. And what happens when we take away all the layers, distraction, and the conditioning? For most people, we all will get into this really dark and scary place because it will uncover our trauma, our pain, limiting beliefs. And it's really unsettling. But that's what we think is really necessary to change our perspective and paradigm of the world, not to just be another programmed machine that lives with our conditioning, but really act in our own accord with our full consciousness and best potential, and really prioritize what's real and what it really means to be a human, which involves love, friendship, connection, meaning, and contribution. But I know it's all easier said than done. It takes a lot of self-work, developing our awareness, rewiring our brain, which involves hours of meditation, going through crisis, a lot of transformation kind of programs. But most of us are not able to just quit our job tomorrow and decide that we're going to do 1 year of Eat, Pray, Love. Not everyone can go to Burning Man, And I myself even found that despite going through my own transformation at Burning Man, it's just really hard to sustain that state of flourishing. I found myself going in and out to my old pattern. So what can we do? And that's why we're so excited about the potential of transformative technology, because it's a way to hack and democratize access to the state of elevated self and increase well-being. Instead of having to spend hours and only people who have fulfilled all these needs are able to access this state, how can we bring this to everyone, to the mainstream layman people, to be able to sustain transformation in their daily life? I think I have kind of build the suspense here. So I'll let Janice to do the honor to dive into what's possible with Transtech, and in practicality, what does this look like?
Okay, thanks, Edric. So transformative technologies, or Transtech for short, are medically and scientifically validated tools to help support mental health and well-being. It is driven by the availability of exponential tech such as AR, VR, sensors, robotics, AI, machine learning, neurofeedback, and biofeedback. And these data that used to be only accessible to doctors and researchers are now readily available in like your own personal device. And it's crazy because you're like looking into your own software system, your human software system, understanding how your neuro and biosignals are giving you better insight into how you live, so that you can better take charge and enhance the way you live and connect with yourself for our well-being. So I'm going to just share some like really quick examples of different Transtech devices. So as you can see here, this is an Aura ring. It helps to monitor your sleep so that you're able to track your sleeping habits, and maybe you can start winding down earlier or sleep at a more consistent time, and compare your results so that you can achieve better sleep. There are other smart tracking devices like this here. It's a biofeedback tech that helps to manage stress. So it's attached to a part of your clothing in the inside, and it senses the pressure created from the expansion of your chest when you breathe. So when your breath rate kind of quickens or it becomes shallow, you'll be reminded through a vibration to say, hey, it's time to relax. And I found it really, really useful. And I actually discovered that I'm actually a very, 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 very tense person, and it kept vibrating nonstop. So I've kind of like left it on the side, but I found that it really helps, when I'm actually wearing it. The Muse, on the other hand, is a meditation training device. So it measures your brain activity using EEG and provides feedback through sounds such as birds chirping to provide you feedback on like whether you are in a calm state or whether you should try and get yourself in one. So other than wearables, there are also other types of Transtech with more specific use cases. On the robotics and AI level, Replica is a machine learning app that helps with social anxiety and loneliness. So you can actually create a personal AI to have conversations with, and it's a very safe space to share one's thoughts and feelings and beliefs or experiences and memories. And it actually, talks to you and learns how you talk to it, and it becomes like your best friend. The other kind of AR VR Transtech is this program called Trip. It's a digital drug that helps users train their or achieve using binaural beats and state-inducing visual effects for a more immersive wellness experience. So I've tried it myself when I went to the Transtech conference in the US last year, and I was blown away by the experience that I had, meditating on it, because everything that I'm looking at and feeling is enhanced just by sound and sight. So Transtech is not only about individual well-being, it can also be applied to spaces and places. Such technology is able to sense our interaction with the environment, and it can consider the air and water and lighting and materials used to enhance our state of well-being. An example would be the use of circadian lighting. I think most people would be quite familiar with this term already. It leverages data on how like an average human body interacts or reacts with light, so that the lighting can be tweaked to enhance your mood or reduce hyperactivity, improve your cognition, or maybe even like reduce the errors and accidents you make in your work. But these examples, are like not even the tip of the iceberg. There are tons of different wellness tech, Transtech devices out there that you could explore. Yeah. So on the topic of healthy spaces tech, in the last 3 months, I wanted to share in our seed project in Audacity, Transtech had the privilege to work with Attila Farkas. So he was a researcher in a residency program arranged by Mistletoe Foundation. And previously, Attila was with Johnson & Johnson to create a prototype application that can signal levels of suicidal feelings. He's also a holder of a patented technology to diagnose schizophrenia using a mobile device with 3D computer graphics. So with his knowledge of the human mind and the availability of Expo Tech, we were able to kind of conceptualize an ecosystem that meshes the human and non-human wares to measure and understand how we can achieve flourishing in spaces and places. And this is what we have so far. I think Mohammed had a question at our booth. He wanted to find out more about this project. So I'll just, dive a little bit into it. So the idea of this intention-based internal states, right, is to harness our biosignals to change our environment according to the internal state that we want to be in, hence giving the project name. So our vision was to create a transformative space that would enable anyone to enjoy and advancement in mindful consciousness, mental well-being at home or in a public space by just having that intention and thought. So imagine if this could be deployed at scale, right? Maybe like in a city or like a community. So to share very briefly also about where we are at now with this project. So what we have done that with EEG patterns produced by Neuro, and we've kind of fed it into a platform called Neuromore. And depending on the kind of output software, the EEG patterns can actually create visualizations and sounds, or even alter the lights and colors around you to alter the state you wish to feel. So I can't go too deep into it, but if you want to get connected with Attila on finding more about this project, please let me know. Please let us know. So I guess I kind of gave an overview of what Transtech is, and we kind of talk about why it's important to kind of apply Transtech, because well-being is quite personal and subjective, right? And even though if we want individuals to kind of program their own intention-based states, we need to see how we can apply it into a wider space that's more inclusive for everyone. So why spaces and places? It's an important area of focus because we spend 80% of our time indoors, but with more of half of the world in lockdown now, I think that percentage is quite an understatement. Meantime, we're also expecting 68% of the world population to be living in cities by 2030. And in last year, in 2019, APAC became a majority urban region for the first time, with 2.3 billion people living in cities. City density will also continue its upward course, and recently we found out at Exco World that 85% of the world population are already living in 100,000 kilometer square densities. So that's quite a scary number. But whatever the impact on world population during this pandemic, the urgent need to address our evolutionary failures still remains. So how can we leverage exponential tech to transform our spaces and places into platforms that enable us to find purpose, meaning, and achieve our fullest potential? First, I think we must understand that we do not live in silos unaffected by the world around us. Based on Bronfenbrenner's theory, well-being actually starts from the interaction we have in our immediate environment, and it expands. And the environment we live in has an impact on our well-being. So both environment and its people must be involved in like a co-participatory work to create the new operating system. Secondly, I think you all would know this, we must unlearn the existing system that optimize for GDP, attention, consumption, efficiency, and productivity. We have to consider what is an important indicator to measure the flourishing of people who live in it. GDP, for example, was designed after the Great Depression as an economic tool to monitor output, right? It was not intended to measure social progress or quality of life. Employment stats, on the other hand, tells us what proportion of people have jobs, but they don't tell us what proportion of those are paid too little to afford a decent standard of life, or how many proportion of that are worried about, whether they have work the next month. Smart cities, on the other hand, it's not a new phenomenon, but it is less than 2 decades. However, they have grown exponentially, with many nations trying to implement a top-down approach. And often it's an agreement between a mayor and a technology vendor. But the availability of this disruptive tech that solves for optimization and efficiency does little to, contribute to our happiness or well-being. Like Edric had mentioned, quick, fast, cheap, and always on content creates a cognitive overload and adds stress to an exponentially changing environment. But the good thing is that we must remember that technology is just a tool, and it is an amplification because our intention that builds what is being optimized for. While we think of smart cities, flourishing cities, on the other hand, exemplifies emergence, experimentation, and bottom-up engagement. So through this global pandemic, I think we're learning that there's a greater need to move beyond smart cities to wise cities. And there is a need for resiliency so that communities can bounce back from disruptions. And it's time to ask new questions about well-being and flourishing. So over the past few months, we've been talking to architects, urban planners, neuropsychologists, behavioral scientists, healthcare professionals, and other experts in the human environment space who wish to explore the generation of technology that can be deployed at scale for elevated human potential and performance. And the connections that we found was really, really interesting. After talking to all these people, it revealed that innovation flourishes best at 3 intersections: minds and meaning, places and potential, and science and art. for minds and meaning, why the intersection exists is because we realize that, we live in a moment of artificial minds and machine learning, right? But the very machines that we're building are actually frightening our very livelihood and existence. But the same technologies can actually also further human creativity and learning and flourishing. So the questions we're going to be asking here is, how can human instinct and common sense be supported by technology instead of being taken away? And how can we actually achieve mastery, purpose, and happiness? And how can meaning-making of cities be manifested through tech? In the places and potential space, ever since the pandemic, we've been encouraged to spend our time indoors, right? So there's an ever more importance to kind of transform our spaces to be more livable. So the questions we ask here are, how can the scope of architecture and urbanism in a built environment expand to build human resilience? And what can we do to intervene to disrupt without disrupting? Science and art, on the other hand, is an intersection that's quite unique because the opposite of this spectrum is very different, right? Science collapses things down to theory, incompressible. So the questions we want to ask is, how can we utilize art and science in the city to expand human centeredness? And how can we actually use art and science to enhance cognitive and emotional abilities? Well, redesigning cities takes an orchestrated effort from all disciplines, from private to public. Each city is very unique and its own living identity. So that's why we think that cities are the best opportunity to deploy and achieve global well-being. So apart from talking to these people, we've also found that there is a growing desire to come together to talk and ask you questions on what flourishing YCs might look like. So I also want to take this session as an opportunity to share that we will be hosting our very first Humanity Design Summit starting this June. And the objective for this multi-event summit is to actually identify 3 to 5 testable and scalable experiments. So initially, this summit was meant to be a physical summit in Singapore, but because that's not possible anymore, it's going to be a 100% online summit to start off with. And from there, we will look at how people can come online, develop meaningful insights, create a common language and tools, and foster some connections with the cross-disciplinary community of experts and stakeholders, because we also learned that different experts find it very hard to talk to one another. Really, really good opportunity to come and, talk to people and do things that you may not be able to do during your day-to-day kind of work. So if you have a keen sense to be part of this design summit, do let us know and register your interest at the booth in the expo. Yeah, so I guess we'd like to end us talking here and hear from you. How would you like your flourishing city to be? Or if any thoughts and discussions you want to bring up, I'm going to start adding people into this conversation. Edric, do you want to add on anything before we start adding people?
No, I think we only have 7 minutes left, so I think we can go ahead and do Q&A. I think just to wrap up, we talked about how we need to have a different view around well-being, how flourishing needs to be the new operating system. And in order to get to flourishing, we need to take the red pill to really uncover the truth. But it's hard to do that. So we think Transtech can be the way to aid us to get there faster and to get there at scale, and how flourishing shouldn't be constrained to individual level, but we're interconnected to everybody else in our environment. So that's why the flourishing our city should be a very important conversation all of us need to have. And I think with that summary, we'd love to hear from the floor. If you have any questions or you have any thoughts from what we shared today, we have about 7 minutes to cover quite some ground in our discussion. So if you'd like to participate, you can choose to request to join us in our video call or leave your questions in the chat below. So I saw that we got a question around the difference between Transtech and deep tech. Good question. So Transtech can be a part of deep tech, and deep tech can also be a Transtech. So it's like a Venn diagram. So I think deep tech looks into heavy, deep science that, as Shure mentions, involves a lot of machine learning, and most of the time are hardware based. But not all deep tech is designed with the purpose of solving human well-being and human transformation, while that is the core kind of direction and purpose of Transtech. And a lot of the Transtech ideas and innovations are also part of deep tech because, as you've seen from our example, our research fellow looked into how we can create new ways to integrate softwares and hardwares to create a projection of internal state. But not all Transtech is also part of deep tech. Like a well-being or meditation app is not a deep tech because it's simply a way to project guided meditation onto a platform. So hope that kind of clarifies the question and the difference between deep tech and Transtech. So we got another question from Husna. How does Transtech link to and conscious living in the future? Janice, you want to take that?
Yeah. So Transtech gives you insight into what's important for you. So I guess it starts from within, in the sense of purpose, in what you want to do and how you want to feel in order to contribute to a sustainable and conscious living in the future, right? At the moment, I am not aware of any specific Transtech devices that actually targets that, serves that purpose. But what I know is that the various Transtech devices that have been developed in terms of changing our spaces and places do consider the kind of. But I would love to answer your question about that later. Let me go find out from my team.
So
Edric, do you have anything to add on that?
How we get people to care more about sustainability and environment that's when you saw the slide around the Maslow hierarchy of needs. I think when we hit self-transcendence, when we move our view beyond and our priority beyond ourselves, and that's when we truly transcend beyond our individual needs. And you could see how Transtech plays a part in getting people to get there faster, either by making sure you pay more attention, in tune with your individual feelings, or I know most of the tech today still focuses a lot on state changes, which is to help you feel less stress. But there's a lot more and more discussion around transformation or kind of sustained state change. So instead of just changing how you feel temporarily, really changing your mind view. Most people have the kind of like breakthrough moment when they had like psychedelics, for example, or when they like went through a deep traumatizing experience. So I heard of an idea about trauma technology. Well, how can we use technology to induce or simulate that kind of environment where we could feel a controlled level amount of pain, so just enough that not just to develop that level of consciousness and connection to our environment and people beyond us, but not to the point where you feel suicidal or depressed. So I think Transtech is still also a very new and kind of nascent type of area. So I think with more and more discussion around flourishing, we'll see more innovations around human consciousness that's made possible with Transtech.
Jason has a question. How do you think these technologies will be made accessible to masses in the future? That is actually what we are trying to work towards, and what and part of our vision, which is to make Transtech more inclusive to everyone. So we don't have an answer here, but that's definitely on our agenda. And one of the things that I forgot to share earlier was the project that Attila had worked on. The idea is that we want to open it up to make it open source, so that anybody can actually program their own specific internal intention-based states that is unique to their needs and their body and their mind. But we're definitely working on, and that's the purpose actually of the summit that we're putting together in June. It's the question we want to answer is, how can we not leave people out of this transformative technology and transformative cities?
Jen, do we have more? We only have 1 minute left, I think.
Okay.
We have one more question, but I guess we're at time, so we can follow up with those who asked the question. My sister, actually, right after the breakout.
Okay. We'll I just wanted to talk about the slide. Thank you for joining us at Virtual University. So I just wanted to do a little bit of a public service announcement here. So we will be sharing a Miro board in the post-event communications, where you can actually ask more questions and share your thoughts and ideas. Up next, we're actually having the next segment of the Virtual Open City. So we have 2 workshops happening at the same time. One is about food, where Chef Ern actually showing us how the different ways we can use potatoes. And number 2 is Relax with the Wim Hof method by Chun. So Chun will be sharing a breathing technique that has helped him recover from various in sports related injuries and actually help him to kind of recover and remain more calm and sort of stuff. Yeah. How do we be part of the summit? We'll find you, but you can leave a note in our booth in the
reach out to us via our emails as well.
I've got to run.
Yes.
Sorry,
thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate everyone's thoughts and ideas. We'll see you around.